Not having stayed at home for a week, Lemuel Gulliver set off on another trip on the ship Good Hope. But after a few days the ship was overtaken by the pirates. They hijacked the ship and tied up the entire crew. Gulliver tried to escape, so as punishment, the pirates dropped him in a boat to the will of the waves and winds.
Oh no!
For a long time Gulliver circled the open ocean, until he noticed land on the horizon. He swam to the shore and began to survey the land.
What?
Suddenly a huge shadow covered the sun. Raising his head, the astonished Gulliver saw a large island soaring in the sky. Exhausted by hunger and thirst, Gulliver began to scream, waving his hat, hoping that the inhabitants of the island would notice him. Then the natives took pity on Gulliver and lowered the stairs, so that he could climb the island. When Gulliver climbed the stairs, he found a crowd of very strange locals in front of him. Their heads were tilted to the right or left, with one eye looking inward and the other upward. And at each noble person there was a servant who patted the owner on the lips or ears, distracting him from his thoughts. Gulliver received a warm welcome.
Nice.
He was fed in the palace, and even had a tour of the island. So, Gulliver realized that the earth soars in the sky due to a huge magnet, and at the base there is a giant diamond.
Okay.
But life in the flying kingdom was boring, so Gulliver soon returned to Earth. Before his eyes was a devastated country where local residents, dressed in rags, were starving. As it turned out, these people did everything in their lives the other way around. They built a house starting from the roof. They tried to get the sun's rays from cucumbers.
What?
And the artists were blindly mixing paint for paintings. Local scientists did not understand why words are needed in a language. After all, to everyone who began to argue, they simply cut out the brains and swapped them. Gulliver's surprise knew no bounds, and he hastened to leave the island. Going to neighboring lands, Gulliver found himself in the kingdom of darkness and gloom. Trembling with fear, he continued his journey. Suddenly a ghost appeared from the darkness. In fright, Gulliver tried to hide, but the spirit noticed him. He beckoned the traveler with a gesture, and Gulliver had no choice but to follow the ghost. Very soon they reached a large castle, and Gulliver was invited to a reception with the king. Walking through the castle, Gulliver saw hundreds of ghosts who cooked dinner, cleaned and guarded the chambers. It turned out that this country is ruled by a powerful sorcerer who can raise the dead. And all the living dead serve him. The wizard received Gulliver with honors. And to entertain such a rare guest, he began to revive anyone whom Gulliver asked. They were great warriors, sages, and even primitive people. But tired of wandering, Gulliver thanked the wizard and soon left the kingdom of darkness. He went to the nearest port, where he hoped to board a ship bound for England. Walking around the port, Gulliver immediately attracted attention. A foreigner in such places was a rarity, and therefore Gulliver was mistaken for a spy, seized and urgently taken to the local ruler. The foreigner was immediately found guilty. And as punishment, Gulliver had to crawl across the throne room on his stomach, licking the floor in his path. This was the custom. At the end, Gulliver bowed to the monarch 7 times, hitting his head on the floor. Then the governor looked thoughtfully at Gulliver, and then pardoned him. Miraculously freed, Gulliver ran out of the castle, and went to the nearest port, where he boarded an English ship. I must say that Gulliver never returned to these parts. A long time ago, in a small kingdom, there lived a king who loved to dress up more than anything else. He could spend whole days in the dressing room, showing off in front of the mirror in new dresses. So, for every occasion of life, whether it be a trip to the theater or just breakfast, the king had prepared the best fabrics and robes. And then one day 2 swindlers arrived in the kingdom. On the streets of the capital, they heard about a king who loves to dress up. And then a cunning plan ripened in the heads of the deceivers. They decided to pass themselves off as weavers capable of making a wonderful fabric, better than which nothing could be imagined. And so that the king would definitely pay attention to them, the scammers spread a rumor that their fabric had magical properties. It is completely invisible to those who are impenetrably stupid. When the monarch heard about the incredible weavers who appeared in his kingdom, he was very happy. After all, at last he had the opportunity to understand which of the royal advisors and subjects is stupid. The next day, the king summoned the weavers, showered them with gold and ordered him to sew the best dress from magic fabrics and gold threads. Then the deceivers took all the valuable materials, took the gold and set to work. They sat down at the empty royal machines and began to pretend that they were sewing a magic dress for the king. The rumor about the outlandish fabric spread throughout the kingdom, and everyone wanted to see it. The king himself was no exception. He really wanted to take a look at the dress, but he was afraid that he would be stupid and simply would not see the fabric. And so the monarch decided to send his wisest advisor to them, the most intelligent and honest among all.
Oh, yeah!
When the old advisor came to the workshop, he saw how the deceivers were working behind empty machines. They lifted up a non-existent dress, straightened invisible folds, and installed fake designs. Then the counselor, frightened that he would seem a fool, pretended to see the dress too. Returning to the kingdom, the old man did not find the strength to admit that he had not seen anything. Therefore, he reported to the king that the fabric was magnificent. The minister followed the advisor to the weavers. He looked at the empty machines in the same way, and was afraid that he was actually stupid and unworthy of his place.
Oh no!
So the minister went back to the king and praised the fabric even more than the counselor did.
Nice!
Finally, the king decided to admire the curiosity himself, until it was removed from the machine. He came to the weavers with a whole retinue of courtiers. But neither the monarch nor the advisors saw the dress.
Nice!
However, each of them began to admire the outfit, imagining that everyone else was actually seeing the fabric. Satisfied with the result, the king awarded the cunning Knight's Cross and granted them the title of court weavers. And then the day came when you could put on a new outfit. The rogue weavers volunteered to assemble the king themselves. They dressed the ruler in non-existent trousers, then a camisole, and an invisible kaftan. And all the nobility who watched the process only said how beautiful the costume was, and how it went to the king. Finally the monarch went out into the street. The subjects had already gathered around, hoping to see the magnificent attire of the king. However, none of those who came did not admit that they saw nothing. When suddenly a little boy appeared from the crowd and exclaimed that the king was naked. The crowd picked up these words, and everyone around began to laugh at the ruler. The monarch realized that he had been deceived, but continued his march, as befits a king. And his retinue still supported the mantle, which in fact did not exist.